Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our 12th annual youth conference. We have an amazing lineup today. But first and foremost, I'd like to remind you of all the hard work that was put into this, primarily from My Impact team. They're a high school youth group here based at our NICC Masjid, and they do amazing work year round, with this being their big project for the year. So while it is organized and all the work is done by the youth, the programming is for everybody. We have an amazing lineup for you guys today, including our first session that will be starting in just a few minutes with Sister Isra Chakr, and even more after that. But for now, I'm going to start off by introducing you to our co-president for this year, Sama Ben Amir.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to our first session of the day. My name is Sama Ben Amir. I am a senior at Dublin Saida High School, and today we are kicking off with a session with Sister Isra Chakr titled Passing the Mic, Amplifying the Voices of the Youth, on ways for how young people can utilize their voices for change. Isra Chakr is a civil rights activist, campaigns and advocacy expert, and public speaker. She serves as the Refugee Migration and Protection Campaign lead at one of the leading international NGOs in the world, Oxfam. She is an appointed public advocate for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, USA, for her invaluable contributions in raising awareness and funds for their projects supporting refugee assistance. Her work has been featured on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, Now This, AJ+, ABC News, Al Jazeera, CNN, the Associated Press, Vice News, and the Washington Post. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sister Isra Chakr. So take it away, Sister.
Everyone, assalamu alaikum to everyone attending. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you to this amazing youth committee that has put this incredible conference together. This is exactly the sort of activities and conversations we need to be having. My name is Isra Chakr, and that was a very generous introduction. Today, I want to talk about mobilizing the power of your voice and defining allyship, and what I like to refer to as allies as an accomplice, and amplifying the voices of others with you all. You've had a great amount of speakers sharing a lot about their journeys and what got them to where they are today. By being an activist and growing up Muslim in America, where I found it very challenging in my small town to feel like I belonged there, to feel like I was as American as everyone else, despite being born there, speaking like everyone else. I knew that I had to do something to make a difference in the status quo, to combat the bullying and the discrimination that I was experiencing. As a youth member, I decided that what was my most powerful tool that I had, what was something that I knew that I could do something and change the world around me, it was my voice. And that's the most powerful thing any of us have. So I really want to share more about what you can do about mobilizing the power of your voice and how you step up and amplify the voices of others with you today. So getting right into that, finding your voice starts with identifying your purpose, right? What are you passionate about? What thing or issue moves you to take action? What do you have expertise in or want to gain expertise in? And another question you want to ask yourself to find your purpose, which really defines your voice, is if you could describe yourself in one sentence, what would you say? So people don't think about this often enough, but I feel like as youth, especially, I always suggest and recommend and hopefully inspire people to think through what their purpose really is in life. For me, I know my purpose is to advocate for the rights and protections of others, especially marginalized and underrepresented communities who are under attack all the time, right? And we see that in the world that we're playing in, the world that's playing out in front of us today. We see that in the challenges that we're experiencing today, and all the different communities that are under attack. So as a person, how I want to show up for the world is my purpose. And that's beyond just what you want to do in terms of like your career or any specifics that you have of what you want your profession to be or your education to be. Purpose is a way of life. It's your moral compass. It's the root of who you are. And everything else that you do is a reflection of your purpose. But it doesn't always have to line up exactly with a specific career, right? And so when I say that I advocate for the rights of people, yes, alhamdulillah, I'm able to do that in my career as well. But I also do that in my personal time. And I also think about that in my day-to-day activities and my day-to-day interactions and who I come into contact with. So what are you trying to achieve with this purpose, right? If you want to start a business that gives back to causes in need, and you want to make a difference, and you want to, expand on something in the world around us today, what does that look like, right? So whether it's starting a business or your profession or a personal brand, or just your story and your narrative and what you want to share with the world around you. The next thing is to set your intentions. Reflect on why you are living this purpose. Who is it to please, right? Your intentions should always start with serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and contributing something positive to the world around you. And so always think about that purpose and that intention. That is the root of finding your voice. So when I think about intentions, it's not just about the grand world around you and thinking very big picture. This is even something that's very small and minute. So focusing on your family, your community, your online audience, whatever it may be, that is all part of contributing something to the people around you. After you sort of define your purpose and you set your intentions, the next thing you really want to do is think about what your strategy and plan is, right? Like as you think about really day-to-day life activities, your schoolwork, your classwork, your long-term career goals, your short-term goals, you always want to think about designing a strategy and a plan. And it doesn't have to be as, complicated as you may think it is, but really writing out and reflecting on the steps you want to take to achieve your purpose and use your voice effectively. I do this every single day in my life. I'm a campaign strategist. I lead a campaign, and the way that we do our work and how I even able to even advocate for the rights of other people is by writing everything out. I set my objectives. What are my goals to achieve this? How do I want to do that, right? What steps am I going to take? Am I going to use social media? Am I going to use traditional media? Am I going to, just work on building alliances and grassroots organizing with people, mobilizing with people? Who is it that I need to influence for something that I want to do and living my purpose, right? So right now with my work, a lot of times I'm influencing the president of the United States in his administration, or I'm influencing Congress, or I'm influencing the American public, and really thinking through broadly on how do I get them to buy into the narrative and protect and want to protect and advocate for vulnerable populations as well, like refugees, asylum seekers, what's happening at our southern border, temporary protected status holders, and anybody who's impacted by discriminatory policies like the Muslim and African bans. So this is just an example of the strategies that I do every single day in the work that I lead. But when you think about your strategy and your plan, really identifying who your audience is that you want to be working with, right? Like, who are you trying to influence in this? Sometimes it could be something as simple as trying to convince your parents on something that you want to do, right? Or you get your friends on board for a project or an outing. And so that is your audience in that terms. And then they should be treated as stakeholders, which is really, really important. Making sure that everyone that you're going to engage and who you're trying to influence is a stakeholder. So their opinions matter, their perspective matters, and you want to create a good communication system with them where you are hearing from them and they are able to be inspired by you, but also you give you feedback and help you grow in your mission. And then other than that, it's really figuring out, defining the milestones to check your progress and reassess your steps and your tactics. So tactics is just actions. So for example, posting on my Facebook would be a tactic. Sharing a story on Instagram would be a tactic. So tactic just simply means, actions, but really defining your milestones. So you always are able to hold yourself accountable and check on your progress. No one just gets from point A to Z in a straight line and it's easy. Like, it's very rare you'll find that in anything that you're going to do in life. But when you're able to understand that, okay, the road is probably going to have ebbs and flows, highs and lows, but you're going to check in and have moments where you're going to check in with yourself, check in on the progress of you reaching your goals and you finding your voice and living your purpose. But also then if you need to evaluate and change, your tactics or your actions, or sort of pivot a certain way, that you build that time and that space to do that within living your purpose. And then after you, do your milestones, you just live your purpose and use your voice intentionally. And that is so critical because people sometimes get so caught up in the building up of what it looks like, right? The vision of how I come from my purpose to actually living it and implementing it. But then you have to live it with thoughtfully and intentionally, right? And so that means recruiting mentors and colleagues who you can consult and who will hold you accountable. None of us are perfect. And the work of speaking out and speaking up for truth and truth to power is not easy, and it's not perfect. It requires a lot of courage, And it also requires people to know that they're going to make mistakes, right? Like I've made mistakes, everyone makes mistakes. And when you make those mistakes, you want to make sure that you have people in your close circle that are going to be able to tell you, I think you made a mistake here, and I think you need to walk yourself back or check in on what you've done and then hold yourself accountable, right? And that's really, really important. You don't want to be surrounded by yes men. You want to be surrounded by people who actually care about you, want you to be the best that you can possibly be, and will help you get there. And then always remember that your supporters, your friends, your family, your audience will and should hold you accountable, right? Don't ignore it. Don't deflect. Don't get defensive. Don't dismiss it. As long as they're obviously, coming to you and communicating with you respectfully, and it's constructive criticism, listen, reflect, and then take appropriate action. Everyone's going to need this. And I have multiple mentors and people in my circle that constantly hold me accountable. And I'm very grateful for that. And then your voice is more than your words, right? It is how you show up. So your actions and your impact. So when people tell me, well, I don't necessarily like speaking, or is speaking the only way that we use our voice? Do we have to be on a microphone somewhere? Absolutely not, right? Your social media is your voice. And that is part of what that is. Your social media platform is basically what you're telling the world every single day. When you post something on it, people are seeing that and perceiving your opinions and your thoughts on what that looks like. So really making sure that always recognizing that your voice is more than your words. And that also means that when whatever you preach, you want to do, right? Whatever you say and you encourage people to do, whatever you're speaking is actually being implemented in action as well. And that starts first and foremost with you before you inspire other people to do the same. So now that you have your voice and you figured out the voice of what my purpose is, and you know what you want to do in your life, and you know what you want to show up. And remember, this purpose is something of who you are deep down in your root of who you are, but it can be tied to a specific action, volunteer work you want to do, working on more social justice issues that you want to do, your career, it can be anything, and it will stay the same, right? And it can also evolve and grow. So it could be consistent for all the work that you do because that is who you are, but everything can change in life though. So, I studied architecture for my undergraduate degree, and I thought I was doing architecture because I really loved drawing and sketching, but I also really wanted to create spaces that brought humanity together and created community spaces that were inclusive of everyone. That was why I chose architecture. But as I was studying architecture and got involved in student government and got involved in extracurriculars and student organizations, and was leading political movements on campus and was leading actions with community and really fighting for the rights of underrepresented people, I realized that my voice was so much more powerful, being able to connect people to causes. So I called myself a social architect, right? You're probably wondering, what is that? Yeah, I don't know. That's not really a term. And when I told my parents that I wanted to be a social architect my senior year, after, of course, I was going to plan to finish my degree because, my parents had worked really hard to put me through school, and I didn't have the privilege or opportunity to start over again. But I knew that after I graduated, I was going to sort of change directions. And of course, when I told them that I was a social architect, they sort of looked at me and they said, there's definitely no such thing. And I was like, probably, because I sort of made that up for myself. And then they said, is there any money in this career? It seems like there isn't, which was probably also true. And lastly, if I was sure I didn't want to be a dentist. So, they always thought that I had good teeth for being a dentist, and shout out to all the dentists out there. That was just definitely not my purpose. And so I really persisted. And of course, with their support and my whole family's support, lived the life that I knew I had to live. And found out that really what that really is, social architecture, is advocacy and being an advocate and being an activist and working for the rights of everybody, not just my own community, and really being intersectional in how I approach this work, and making sure that I use everything I have and I mobilize my privilege in every way to do this work every single day, personally and professionally. So when you recognize the power of your voice, it is the most literally powerful tool, right? And it's something that no one can take away from you. No one can change, no one can alter. That is yours and yours, your own. And it is your, secret weapon that you can do anything in the world because of, and you can do anything that you set your mind to. But when you figure out the power of your voice and you're like confident in it, then it really becomes important to amplify the voices of others, right? And so in this context, I know that the word ally is much more common knowledge, So I'm going to refer to it here. But for me personally, I prefer the word accomplice, because to me, an accomplice is someone who really is doing the work with you, is with you in planning and strategizing and really standing in solidarity and taking up as much space as you need them to as a directly impacted person in supporting you and amplifying your voice. But for this context, let's refer to it as an ally, because I know it's more mainstream. So what is an ally, right? An ally is someone who has privilege, but chooses to stand for and with marginalized communities by taking tangible, ongoing actions to dismantle systems of oppression. So let's really break that down. So marginalized communities in this example can always refer to anybody targeted by oppression, right? So that includes, but not limited to, people of color, Black people, Muslims, immigrants, refugees. It can be women, people with disabilities, all of that. Anyone who basically is at a disadvantage in the system and there's a system of oppression working against them is someone that you can be an ally to. And it's someone who carries privilege, right? An ally or accomplice has privilege and an identity, and that's what they're choosing to stand for and stand with. And so they're mobilizing their privilege and moving forward. So to be an ally is to take on the struggle as your own. It's to transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. It's to amplify the voices of the directly impacted before your own, right? So if you're not directly impacted by this issue or by this, social justice cause that you want to work on, but somebody else in your circle is. So it's really important, if you want to be an ally there, is to be empathetic to it, understand that it's deeply impacting to this community and deeply harmful and dangerous potentially, but then to amplify their voice before and above your own, right? It's not about you. So acknowledge that even though you feel pain and you empathize with that the conversation is not about you. Speak up, even when you feel scared. And this is really important because I know that there are so many different issues in the world today and challenges that a lot of us don't necessarily feel like we are experts in, or that we know a lot about, or we're not educated enough to be able to speak up on it, right? And so in that situation, educate yourself, right? Like, go do what you need to do to feel confident in it. And even speaking up doesn't have to be, again, you taking a really intense and loud stance on something. It could be sharing the post of somebody who's directly impacted, which I suggest it should be, right? It should be, giving them a space on your platform. So you are just understanding that you need to use whatever you have to amplify theirs and to speak up whenever you can. That also means that when you're in conversations with someone, or you hear someone say something that is racist, that is xenophobic, that is Islamophobic, whatever it may be, and it may not affect you personally, but you know that it's a wrong thing to say, that's also to speak up, right? If you feel safe and comfortable, to speak up and say, that's not okay, to be an effective bystander and really nip these things in the bud. Because when you're able to, even on the social, like the smallest level of interactions between people, and you're able to address these issues, that only helps make someone feel like, okay, I'm going to think twice before I say that again. Hopefully never say that again, right? Hopefully you taught that person a lesson to not say those types of things, but to also be a better ally themselves. Next is to own your mistakes and decenter yourself. So like I said earlier, when you have people holding you accountable as an individual, you're going to make mistakes and people will notice around you. And that's a good thing, right? Like, do not look at it as a bad thing. Yes, we all feel bad when we make a mistake sometimes and we don't want to make mistakes, but it's going to happen. It's human, it's natural, especially in the work of social justice. And so it's really important that you just own it, you take accountability for it, and you work to decenter yourself and not make it personal, but really work on how you can improve. And then understand that your education is up to you and no one else. This is really, really a critical point. Your education on these issues is up to you. It's not the burden of the impacted community to carry it for you or to teach you or to educate you. It's on you yourself. So using the resources that we have accessible to us all over the internet, on social media, take advantage of those resources that are just instant at your fingertips and really get educated. There's really not an excuse to feel like you're not really educated. You can't find information on something. No, you can easily find it. It just takes the time and the effort to do so. So all of these about how to be an ally, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to the source, which is a guide to allyship.com by Emily Lamont. She's an incredible activist and writer, and I encourage all of you to go to that website and learn a lot more about what it means to amplify the voices of others. Again, guide to allyship.com by Emily Lamont. So from there, there's steps, right, to like how you then amplify the voices of other people, how you become and be a really good ally or an accomplice. And so number one is to listen to what marginalized people are saying face to face on your social media feed or in the articles you read. It's not about you, your feelings or opinions. It's about hearing theirs. Number two, get educated, right? So seek out books, articles, films, etc., about the history and current issues facing underrepresented and marginalized communities, and attend formal anti-oppression trainings if you can. There are so many organizations and so many activists that are doing incredible work on these things that they are always offering webinars, trainings, or YouTube videos about them. Seek out that and really listen and watch. Number three, get involved. Right? Join local groups working for social justice, subscribe to their email lists, follow them on social media, and show up to support their work. So whether that's, volunteering for them, whether that's, taking action somehow online, attending a virtual event, sharing that virtual with your friends, get involved, right? Take those steps. Number four, show up. So when someone from a marginalized community invites you to an event, go be there to listen, to learn, and to show your support. Sometimes you have to put the words that you're speaking into action, right? All the time. And it's so important that part of that is actually showing up in person and taking the time of your day and using your energy and efforts to be there and stand in solidarity with communities. Number five, speak up. When a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a stranger, like I said earlier, says something hateful or ignorant, call them out on it, right? Silence allows oppression to continue. And silence also means that you're complicit. And I know sometimes that is uncomfortable. I know sometimes it feels awkward. And again, as long as you are physically safe, and of course, it has to be something you want to do and you want to put yourself in that position, then yeah, speak up and call it out. Especially if it's around family and friends, it's easily, you're safer in those spaces to be able to be free to speak up in these ways. Number six, intervene. So when someone is being targeted physically or verbally, intervene only with their permission. This is really important, only with their permission. Focus on supporting them rather than engaging the aggressor. So what does that look like? It means like, how do I support you in this moment? I'm not going to engage the person who's the aggressor in the situation. I'm only focused on how to support you. Number seven, welcome discomfort, right? When you encounter something that makes you uncomfortable, don't dismiss it. Don't ignore it and don't deflect it. Sit with it. Ask yourself, why? Why does this make me so uncomfortable? And welcome it as an opportunity to grow. A lot of this learning is very new to so many of us, especially as youth. You're obviously in an amazing generation where you're getting this learning a lot sooner and a lot earlier than many, many people have. And so really taking advantage of that and being able to welcome the discomfort when you're learning it at this, at this stage in your life is going to help set the best trajectory possible for the rest of your years, inshallah, continued life. 8, learn from your mistakes. You will make mistakes, right? We said that over and over again, but it's such an important lesson that I love to repeat because I think all the time people ask me, I think they look at activists who are online, have big public platforms as being perfect and as making no mistakes. And it's just simply not true. Everyone that you look at as a public figure, as a role model leader has made mistakes, right? So when someone calls you out, don't get defensive. Again, listen, apologize, and change your behavior going forward. And that's really important because without that accountability, you won't be able to move forward, hopefully in a better trajectory. 9, stay engaged. Even when the work gets difficult, stay engaged, right? Oppression is constant and marginalized people do not have the privilege of turning it off. And that's the thing, right? People who are marginalized and being under attack every single day can't turn it off. They wake up every single morning in anxiety, wondering what the day was going to bring, bracing themselves for having to survive and not even thinking through half the time how they're going to thrive to live a safe and dignified life because the fear about their life is so imminent and so pertinent to their forefront of every single day. So really you're making sure that you're staying engaged, right? Not just when the work gets difficult, but also when it stops trending on social media, when it stops being something that's talked about in the news. There's oppression every single day happening around us. And so for you, your commitment needs to stay engaged, right? And even though I know that there are so many different issues that you have to balance and manage, as long as you are staying engaged on the multiple of them, then you're doing great work and you just keep doing that. Number 10, donate. right? So commit to financially supporting a local organization or a national organization doing social justice work in your community, not just once, but on an ongoing basis. So I know, with youth in particular, financial means may not be the best ability. You may not be able to do that. You may not have access to do that, which is okay. Don't feel the pressure that if you're not donating to a cause, and then you're not doing anything for them. So if you're able to donate, even if it's $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, it's still better than nothing, right? But if you're not able to do that, again, also okay. So find other ways to support those organizations. Share their content on your social media, help get them followers, right? Share it with your family and friends, and maybe ask your parents to donate, maybe ask other people to donate to the cause. Like, there are so many other ways that you can support them that will hopefully translate into donations and support for them. All of these resources are from the website called ywca.org, and it's from different amazing resources. A book by Isabel de Bruja, which is So You Want to Wear a Safety Pin, Jamie Utt, So You Call Yourself an Ally, 10 Things All Allies Need to Know, and Southern Poverty Law Center, Speak Up, Respond to Everyday Bigotry. So there's just some resources that you all can use to continue to work on these skills. And really, to show up, this last quote, like I sort of want to talk about and leave you all with, is to show up imperfectly, but open to change is better than not showing up at all. And that's a quote that I got it from a social media platform that I saw, Shop Sunday, but I don't know if anyone here knows who it is, but shout out to that amazing author. But Shop Sunday posted it: to show up imperfectly, but open to change is better than not showing up at all. And this is so important. A lot of times when we talk about amplifying the voices of other youth, this is it. This quote, always remember and always think about it. When you show up imperfectly, it's so much better. And especially if you're open to change, it's better than not showing up at all. So in the world that we're living in today, as youth listening to this, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what can I do? When you think about all of those things that I talked about, all the ways to discover the power of your own voice, and then how it amplifies the voices of others, that should hopefully be a solid foundation for you to think through how you want to show up every day. So really reflect on that. Use this as an opportunity to think through that and really be open to what that looks like as things change. So many communities are under attack, right? We don't have the option of accepting and waiting for the status quo to change itself. We've seen what it's been like to be under attack from the president of the United States for the past 4 years. As Muslims, as a Syrian American for me, and having to navigate what that's been has been very, very challenging. And we have had wins. For example, repealing the Muslim and African bans was a win for so many communities, but it wasn't a win because someone just had to change their heart and mind and wanted to erase this policy. No, it was because of community organizing, community building, people who were impacted not losing the power of their voice, continuing to fight, continuing to stand up against this bigotry and this hateful rhetoric and this fear-mongering policy that was discriminatory and rooted in hate and fear, right? And so they continued to speak up for 4 years. And I worked on this issue directly for the past 4 years. And at first, when it was first introduced as an example of a campaign and as using our voices and speaking up for the voices of others, when it was first signed into office, we were all at the airports, right? We were all protesting. I was in front of the White House every single weekend, every single day, trying to get change to happen. And everyone showed up. There were more than just Muslims in the audience and more than people who were from the countries on the list. People showed up in solidarity and amplified all of our voices. And when we knew that the president wasn't going to change or revoke it or repeal it, we took it to the courts. All right, so my organization co-sponsored an amicus brief with the ACLU when we sued the administration for this discriminatory policy. And that system went all that court work went all the way up into the Supreme Court that summer, which I don't know if you all remember. Supreme Court upheld it. So they kept it legal. They kept it legal and it kept being implemented. And when the Supreme Court buzz died and people stopped talking about it, everyone sort of forgot about it, except for the people that continue to work on it and the people who've been impacted by it and were separated from their families because of it. So we kept persisting. We worked with different organizations, different people from all different communities, continue to find moments and create moments on that timeline for us, continue to create milestones for us to keep the energy going, sustaining and stay engaged on this issue. And so we changed our gears and we looked at Congress. Let's influence Congress. We couldn't do anything in the court system at this point. Let's change our gears towards Congress. And so we focused on Congress, getting them to pass the No Ban Act, introduce it, which was legislation that would have repealed the Muslim ban, but also prevented any future president from being able to enact that ban or some discriminatory policy just like that. And so we put all our energy into Congress. All of our supporters, at Oxford, my organization, constantly go call your member of Congress, write to them, sign this petition to get them to support the No Ban Act. It was heard in the House. It was the first time legislation like this has ever been heard in Congress. And it was heard that hearing was a really, really big deal. And I remember that day was such a powerful day for us in our communities. And then it passed the House, and that was amazing. But of course, we also recognized that at that time, it was not going to pass the Senate. So it sort of stopped there. But again, we didn't give up. We continued to persist. And we said, okay, where else can we be focusing? Where else should we be directing this energy? Because we can't let them win. We can't let this conversation stop. And then we geared our energy towards the presidential candidates. So we switched and pivoted our energy. So our audience kept shifting, as you can see in this journey, but that's normal and that's okay. And that will happen, especially with really big pieces of legislation and laws like this. So we focused on presidential candidates. We demanded and we put out public calls to action, demanding each presidential candidate at the time to stay and commit to repealing the Muslim and African bans on day one. And we got a response from a lot of people. And we also did not get a response from people. And we made sure our supporters knew on social media who did respond and who did support us and who also did not. And so that was part of our strategies. We have to keep people informed. We have to keep the public informed and engaged. And they should know, if they care about this issue, which candidates supported it, which candidates did not. And we continued to put pressure and hold the Biden administration accountable all the way until day one when he repealed it. And yes, we welcomed it. I know I felt relieved that day. I know it was a really, really big win for our communities, and it was something worth celebrating, but we also knew the work wasn't done. And while that happened, it was all because of community organizing. It was all because people were speaking up and used the power of their voice, and also because they amplified the voices of others. It would not have happened without that energy, without that mobilizing, organizing from thousands and thousands of people over the past 4 years. But of course, we know the work isn't even over on this particular issue. We need to pass the No Ban Act. So our work now has been continued focusing on Congress. We need Congress to support this legislation because we want to ensure that no future president can pass an executive order that is rooted in discriminating against people for their faith. So that is where the energy is. And that is sort of finding our purpose. So this is just one example I wanted to share with you, because I think people necessarily don't figure out how do activists do the work that they do, and how do these wins happen, and what are the stories behind these wins? Sometimes you just see the media highlights when something is passed that's really awful, or something awful has just happened, or when something really great has just happened. But there's so much in between those two things that happens takes up so much energy, time, blood, sweat, and tears from people, that I think is so important to share those stories. But this is just an example of that persistence. And so whatever you are passionate about, whatever you want to advocate on, really find your purpose, set your intentions, use your voice thoughtfully and powerfully, bring others along with you. And then if you are not impacted by an issue directly, amplify the voices of others and really stand in community and solidarity. Our work that we do not just advocate for our communities, right? We should not just advocate for our communities. We should be fighting for the rights of all communities. We should be very intersectional in the work that we're doing. We need to be, because when they come for one community, they come for all. And marginalized communities are the same. Family separation is the same. Whether it's the Muslim and African bans separating families like mine, my extended family members in Syria, or it's these asylum seekers seeking asylum legally at the border and being torn apart from their children and with children being put in cages, or it's separating people from temporary protected status and family members from there. All of these, or refugees having to flee, right, crises and being separated from family members in that way. All of these have the same root. Family is everything. And family separation, whether whoever it is that's being separated, is the same feeling. It's cruel and it's heartless. So we need to be on all the different issues that we work on all the different injustices in the world. We need to be intentional about how we show up. We need to show up for every single community all the time, because that is what we're seeing. We're seeing the Asian community under attack, we've seen the Black community under attack for many years with police brutality. And we know that these are issues that affect our communities deeply. and their injustice playing out right in front of our eyes. So we have to be engaged, we have to be active, and we have to speak up for everybody. And that is something I want you all to remember at the end of this. And I thank you so much for hearing me. I know we want to do some question and answer. So I want to be able to open up the space for you all to ask any questions, to reflect on anything that I shared as well. And I'm just so proud of all that you are doing. You inspire me, and I love speaking to youth more than anything because I know that you are our future, and that is not, cliche sounding or cheesy. It truly is that, and our future is in your hands, and anything that I can do to be a resource to you all, please feel free to reach out on my social media, via email, anything that you need, and just continue to speak up and never let anyone diminish your voice, take it away, or make you doubt it. And together, I know that we can make change happen because ultimately change is on all of us. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, sister, for your insightful advice and empowering words. Like you said, we'll be moving on to the Q&A portion for the latter half of the session. We have a few questions prepared, but if you, for all our viewers, if you have any questions at all throughout the duration of the session, please feel free to share them with us so we can pose them to Sister Sada. So for question number 1, how did you build your credibility and public speaking skills as an advocate?
I think more than anything, my credibility is the work that I've done, is by committing to the work. No one just becomes credible without doing the work. And at first, I remember when I moved to DC, again, not knowing anyone here in this area and not having a job specifically lined up in the work that I wanted to be doing, not really even knowing what that work looked like. I had to put in a lot of work to build a network and to meet people and to connect with communities and volunteer my time. So I volunteered with a multitude of organizations, multitude of campaigns, political campaigns, local campaigns, national ones that I was learning. And I just took those opportunities to use my skill set that I knew I had and learn as much as I possibly could. And again, my experiences in college and organizing in college and in high school, everything that I did was really specific to helping me understand that my voice did matter and really building that confidence in it. So when I came out into the real world, yes, while I was super intimidated, I knew that I had to build and establish those relationships. And that's exactly what I did. So working with people in community, building really strong relationships, not ones where you were looking for an opportunity or being opportunistic about it, but rather truly because I care about you and I want to know the work that you're doing and I want to support the work that you're doing. I put in a lot of time, a lot of hours, again, volunteering at first. Then when I got my first job, it was an internship and I loved it. And I was able to connect with so many people. And I was actually working on program support for Central Western Africa at this nonprofit organization, an NGO. And I really loved it. But I realized, right, as you learn and you take these experiences, that program work wasn't really for me. I didn't find a passion for it. I didn't find it very interesting. I felt like I would be better served, again, being somehow representing these issues on the forefront. And at the time, when I was sort of in this space trying to figure out my next steps, the Syria crisis had gotten tremendously worse. And being in DC, being a Syrian American with the privilege of being born and raised here, right? Well, I have extended family members who are still in Syria. I knew that there was an opportunity for me to do something about it. And there was a lack of Syrians speaking up about these issues in DC and working on these issues in the policy space of the DC world, right? So I found a nonprofit and I applied to be their advocacy and outreach coordinator, and I got the job. And that's when I really understood what advocacy was. So because the nonprofit was so small, I ended up having to do so many jobs. So yes, I was the advocacy manager, but I was also fundraising. I was also event planning. I was doing program work. I was doing everything. But really one of my major prides and goals of that was to take the information that we knew on the humanitarian space, it was a humanitarian organization, happening on the ground, and then sharing those stories to members of Congress, to the United Nations, to the administration. And I really, really took that job so seriously. And it was such a privilege for me, but then also connecting people that were here, right? That had sought asylum here, that were refugees here, and connecting them and giving them that platform was even more important. So watching them tell their story, hearing the impact, I learned so much from them. So really putting in the time and work is what gets you the credibility. I've been doing this work for many, many, many years, alhamdulillah. I just feel like at this point, I've gotten to the point where I really understand it, where of course I'm still learning and growing, but I've understood, I know how to mobilize people, I know how to organize, and I love it. It's everything to me. But part of how you build that credibility in public speaking is practice, right? You have to practice. I did not get good at public speaking just from like, I wasn't born naturally. I mean, I don't think I was good enough to start public speaking. But I will say is that the more I speak in front of people, the more I get comfortable. I really worked on what that means to be a public speaker. Like, how do you speak effectively? So making sure, right, back to what I shared earlier about creating your plan, that was a lot of the focus I had. So what are the three main messages? I would always say, what are the three main messages you want to articulate to people? You want people to walk away from after hearing you with. That is what you need. You build your whole speech around. That is what you build your whole comments around. It doesn't have to be three. It can be one message, right? So the more concise and specific you are, and the more that you use personal narratives and, talk about yourself or other experiences that you know of around you, that helps because people want to know the logical pieces. So using those facts, using those facts to dispel and break down any misconceptions or stereotypes, but then also coupling that with the personal narrative and just staying really engaged, making the issue that you're talking about very relatable to everybody. Anybody can connect with you, but you have to make that connection as the speaker in front of them. So, eye contact, taking pauses when you speak, trying to be as, really articulate and enunciate all the words. Like those are just a very big deal, like, body language, being open and being confident in what you say. And then just, having that humility that at the end of the day, you're doing this to do good and you're doing this because you want to make a difference. And this is your contribution in that way. So all of those things, I hope that answers your question is what I would say in terms of building that credibility. But a lot of it is putting in the work, showing people that you're not just talking about it, you're actually doing it. And that's what I say to people all the time. People ask me, oh, your social media, like, how did you get to be that big? And I'm like, I actually did not think my social media would ever get to be this big. That was never my priority. It was never my number one goal. My goal has always been to do the work, and whatever I can share with others to inspire them and motivate them to take action and give them ways to take action, then that's amazing. That's an extra. It's an amazing extra that I'm able to serve. And ultimately, I'd rather do the work in real life and online in real life than worry about what it looks like online. And that's always been my philosophy. So I'm like, I don't post as often because I'm actually busy doing the work and I can't keep up with having to share it. But I know it's a fine balance because I know people want to know and people want to take action. So it's just about being genuine, being authentic, and putting in the work and building those relationships with people.
And for our next question, how do you deal with opposition to a view you are advocating for?
Opposition to a view that I'm advocating for. So I think there's a lot of ways of how to do that, but a lot of it is trying to understand who it is that is opposing you. I've had members of Congress and people that I've advocated, for example, since we talked about the Muslim ban earlier, I've advocated for that, who've told me that absolutely not. Or for refugee rights and for refugee resettlement and making sure that refugees are welcomed here into our country. I've had people use things like refugees are not safe and they're dangerous people. And then I've had them say that, they're a burden and drain on our economy and we don't want them in our community. So people who are opposition will say that to me when I talk about we need to welcome refugees, right? And what I always do when I think about the framing, so I first look at the person I'm speaking to or whoever the opposition is, and I know that where they're coming from. So if it's a member of Congress, it's because they lean towards Republican or they are full-blown Republican, and this is their conservative views, but it's also rooted in a lot of misunderstanding, lack of education, ignorance, and to be honest, hate a lot of times. So I recognize that right away. And so I don't take it personal, right? I depersonalize it for myself, but then I become prepared to answer and I come prepared to answer from the get-go. So I'm already anticipating when I walk into a specific office that they're going to oppose what I have to say. And so my response to that is always framing it in a way with facts. And there's this concept called facts versus fears, where you basically shut down the fears people have, which are always which stereotypes and misconceptions are rooted from, by using facts. So once, for example, someone tells me that refugees are not safe, I say, actually, they are the safest people coming here because they go through the most stringent vetting process anybody goes through coming to the United States. It takes about 18 months to 2 years to go through. It requires a security check, background check by every single national security agency in the US, FBI, CIA, NSA, all of them. It requires interviews and deep interviews with all family members and known assets if they can find them. And then it even has a physical examination component where they have to be deemed physically fit to come to the United States. So by the time they get here, they are actually the most vetted and the safest people coming to our country, right? So that immediately, using those facts, dispels what they had to say. And what are they going to tell me? They're going to argue facts. Like, it's everywhere. It's fact. You can go look it up anywhere and you'll find that exactly what I said. Or for people who say refugees are a burden financially, I actually tell them that's also incorrect. Refugees, yes, they're given some subsidies and support, financial assistance through the government, but also through some local nonprofit agencies when they move here. But those are always limited and temporary, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year. And on top of that, they're expected to work and begin working here as soon as they come here. So they are having to then, when they get a job, to pay taxes. So imagine someone coming to a country where they may not know the language, where their education from their home country will probably not be translated to a position here or that same sort of job occupation here. And then having to learn the lay of the land, learn the language, and figure out how to find a job, while at the same time working to provide for your family because you know that the assistance is going to be limited, and pay taxes on it. So you're going to become an instant taxpayer. And lastly, also remember that you have to pay the government back. So refugees have to pay the government back after 2 years, the entire cost of their flights. So if a refugee family is coming here with 5 people, that's upwards of $10,000 that they have to repay. So while they're figuring out the burden of how to live day to day, they also have to be thinking about saving money to pay back the US government. So they are not a burden. And there have been many, many reports published by federal agencies that describe how refugees contribute billions more in revenue on the state, local, and federal level than they take in aid. So this is just an example of when you have opposition, frame it in facts versus fears. And of course, if it's a family member or if it's someone who's closer to you as a friend or a social media acquaintance, use those facts and then also use the personal narrative. You can say, I know someone who understands this, or this is something that impacts me, right? If it impacts you directly, then speak to that. No one can take away your experience, right? And if it impacts someone that you know, also speak to that and share those stories. And ultimately, when you try to convince them, right? And you tell them it's okay if you're starting to learn, I'll send you resources, I'll send you things to help you, even though you don't have to. But if you wanted to take that extra measure to send people some resources and help them get educated, then do so. It really just depends to me on who your audience is that you're trying to convince and who your opposition is. But lastly, what I will say, that if you do all of this, right? If you're doing all of this and the person is still not convinced, the person is still an opponent, then you just have to walk away and wish them best, right? You should wish them peace and wish them the best and just walk away and not invest any more of your time and energy into this person or into the situation, because it's not going to go anywhere. Because clearly this person or this group does not want to hear you, and you've tried, so you've done your job. And so just walk away and focus your energy on people who want to hear you, want to engage with you.
Next question, how do we navigate liberal movements that don't necessarily align with our Islamic beliefs?
That's a good question. And I know a lot of people ask this all the time. So for me, and personally, I don't publicly advocate for anything that I don't believe in is aligned with my faith, right? And I think that that's a decision that many people have to make personally. I can't make a sway statement or a general statement up to everybody, but at the same time, you can take that stance and you can have that belief, you personally not speaking up on a certain issue that may not align. And that anyways, I can't relate to, right? If I don't believe in something, I can't really relate to it. So I'm not impacted by it directly. So that's also why that leads to the point where if you're not directly impacted, then you shouldn't be taking up space on the mic. But I also believe that every single person has the right to advocate for their beliefs and their identities, and that's their choice. So if people want to do that in these movements and they want to do that, then I'm not going to work against that or even really get involved in any of that. I'll just take a step to the side and not engage in it. But at the same time, I'm going to continue to speak out for what I know can aligns with my faith and my beliefs, but people to each their own, right? And everybody has the right to speak up for what their beliefs are and what their identities are. And so you can have those two belief systems, even Islamically, you can say that people have that right and that's their choice, and to each their own, while at the same time making sure that if you want to practice within your faith boundaries and what you're comfortable with, then you can totally do that.
And lastly, it's easy to lose hope in the political system that we exist in. So as a change maker in these spaces, how do you keep yourself motivated and prevent yourself from being burnt out as you push for the change you'd like to see?
That's a really good question. I definitely keep myself motivated by having conversations just like this. Connecting with youth in this way is the best way that I keep myself from being burnt out. Seeing that youth show up on a Saturday to something like this and a session like this, so shows me that there are people who care, there are people who want to learn and want to engage, and that motivates me and brings me hope and inspires me. Also, my faith is the root of everything that I do, right? When I know that Allah told us that this life is not meant to be easy, that we know that this dunya is not meant to be easy, it's meant to be a challenging, difficult journey for so many people. And yes, alhamdulillah, there are rewards and blessings, and there's also challenges. I remember that at the end of the day, all that we're here doing is to represent our faith in the best way possible, to be the best, that we can possibly be. In our faith is all about being seekers of justice. And so being an activist and being an advocate and speaking out, even if you don't have that official title, right? If you don't want that official title, just speaking out day to day, you are a seeker of justice. And that is beautiful representation of Islam. And so always remembering that at the end of the day, like our hope, our faith is the constant. It is where I find my peace. It is where I get my strength. It is where I get my patience. And it's where I continue to realize that I know that I'm on this path and this mission to make a difference. So I come back to my faith a lot. I do like a lot of real Quran, making a lot of dua. I, obviously my prayers are really, really important to me every single day, because it also helps me stop from whatever the stress is, whatever the challenges are, and just sit and reflect and remember and sort of ground me. Seeing my community, having a wonderful support system around me, from my family to my friends who are always there for me when I need to vent, when I need to take a step back, but also recognizing my own boundaries and my own limitations. So when I am tired, I take a step back and I rest. When I feel burnt out, I don't continue to push myself. I used to do that a lot when I was younger. And even some moments I still find myself doing that. And I always try to catch myself and say, I can't pour from an empty cup. I need to work on myself and I need to rest so that I can do better and become better and be stronger the next day. So it is totally okay to experience these feelings. If you're feeling them, literally listen in, lean into them, and take a step back and rest and re-energize yourself with whatever feels good for you. Some people, it's all the things that I just mentioned. Others, it's also like physical activity. It's all these different things that you can do to rest and relax and re-energize, but also know that you are part of a collective. And there are so many other people out there that are working on these issues and care just like you. You are not alone. And as a collective, we can make a difference to happen, but you cannot feel that the whole burden is on your shoulders as an individual. So it's really, really important to remember that, and really important to lean into that and just know that everything will be okay, inshallah. I have faith and trust in Allah that everything will be okay. And you just have to have that belief, because that's the only way that, you can get through a lot of these challenging times.
Jazakallah khair again. This is a perfect point to leave off. So thank you again to Sister Isra for your time. This concludes our first session for today. And so now we will be taking a brief intermission, and we will be coming back again at 2:30 for our next session, It Takes a Village, which is a Q&A session for boys, girls, and parents. So stick around. We have a ton of other great sessions lined up for you guys tonight and tomorrow. So thank you again, and we'll see you all later, inshallah.
Everyone, thank you so much for having me.